In the shadow of ancient cathedrals and bustling market squares, a silent invader crept across the seas, carried on the backs of rats and the whispers of merchants. It was the year 1347, and Europe stood on the precipice of an unimaginable horror. Ships docked in Sicilian ports, their crews ravaged by fever, black swellings bursting from their skin like omens from hell. No one could fathom the scale of what was unfolding, a plague that would devour millions, shatter societies, and redefine the very fabric of civilization. But the collapse did not begin with screams. It started with a cough in the distance, a chill in the air that no fire could warm. As the Black Death unfurled its deadly grip, medieval Europe, once a tapestry of feudal loyalty and religious fervor, began to unravel thread by thread, exposing the fragility of an era built on divine order and human toil. Medieval Europe in the mid-14th century was a world of stark contrasts, where towering stone fortresses loomed over mud-churned villages, and the air hummed with the chants of monks echoing through vaulted halls. The continent was a patchwork of kingdoms: England under Edward III, France reeling from the 100 Years' War, the Holy Roman Empire, a loose confederation of principalities, trade routes snaked from the Mediterranean to the Baltic, ferrying spices, silks, and secrets from distant lands. Yet beneath this veneer of prosperity lay a rigid hierarchy. Kings and nobles atop, clergy mediating between heaven and earth, and peasants bound to the soil, their lives dictated by the seasons and the church bells. Cities like Paris and Florence swelled with artisans, scholars, and beggars, their narrow streets alive with the clatter of carts and the scent of baking bread mingled with refuse. Faith was the unbreakable chain holding it all together, with pilgrimages drawing crowds to relics promising salvation, while heresies simmered in the shadows, whispered in taverns under the watchful eyes of inquisitors. Daily life before the storm was a rhythm of relentless labor and quiet devotion, where dawn broke with the lowing of cattle and the swing of scythes in golden fields. Peasants rose with the sun, tilling lands owned by lords who demanded tithes and service. Their hovels clustered around manor houses where feasts celebrated harvests under flickering torchlight. In towns, guilds regulated crafts, blacksmiths hammering iron with sparks flying like stars, weavers threading looms in dimly lit workshops filled with the hum of spinning wheels. Markets buzzed with haggling voices, the aroma of roasted meats and fresh herbs wafting through crowds adorned in woolen tunics and hooded cloaks. Sundays brought respite in grand churches, where incense curled around stained-glass windows depicting saints and sinners, and sermons warned of eternal damnation. Children played in dusty lanes, unaware of the invisible threads connecting their world to far-off ports, where ships unloaded not just goods, but fates sealed in the holds below decks. Life felt eternal, governed by cycles of planting and reaping, birth and burial, with no hint of the rupture lurking beyond the horizon. Whispers of distant calamity first reached European ears through traders, Thais, faint echoes from the east, where entire villages had vanished under a veil of death. Into Crimea, Mongol sieges hurled Plegridon baddies over walls, a grim tactic that seeded the horror westward along the Silk Road. Reports trickled in of strange fevers in Constantinople, bodies piled in streets like forgotten cordwood. But in Europe, these were dismissed as exotic misfortunes, too remote to pierce the complacency of daily routines. Subtle signs emerged: unusual rat swarms in port cities, their beady eyes glinting in the twilight as they scurried through Sailors arriving in Messina spoke of black boils and delirious agonies, yet officials shrugged, attributing it to foul humors or divine displeasure. The air grew heavier with unspoken dread, a quiet unease settling like fog over harbors, where the creak of mooring ropes masked the first infected gasps. No one connected the dots. The dying cats, the sudden silences in warehouses, believing their world impervious, fortified by prayers and castle walls. As autumn winds carried the pestilence inland, tension coiled like a serpent in the underbelly of society. Invisible at first, but insidious. From Sicily, it slithered northward, hitching rides on wagons laden with grain and cloth, infiltrating monasteries and manors alike. Initial outbreaks were sporadic, a merchant collapsing in a Venetian piazza, foam flecking his lips, a family in Provence shuttering their home as fever claimed the youngest. Authorities responded with haphazard quarantines, locking ships at anchor for 40 days, a measure born of desperation rather than understanding. Rumors swelled into panic, markets emptying as vendors fled, leaving stalls abandoned under leaden skies. The church proclaimed it God's wrath for sins unspoken, urging processions that only hastened to spread, bodies pressing close in fervent prayer. Yet the signs multiplied. Empty fields where laborers lay unburied, the metallic temps of blood in the air, and nights pierced by muffled cries. The collapse did not announce itself with thunder. It whispered through deserted alleys, building a pressure that no decree could contain. Key figures grappled with the encroaching shadow, their decisions etching paths toward ruin or fleeting reprieve. Pope Clement VI, ensconced in Ovinos, Palace surrounded himself with fires to ward off miasma, issuing bulls that absolved the dying in mass. Yet his isolation spared him, while the faithful perished outside. In England, King Edward III imposed wage controls to stem the chaos of labor shortages. But this only fueled resentment among survivors demanding fairer shares. Medical minds like Guy de Chauliac experimented with lancing boots, their knives slick with pus under candlelight, misunderstanding the flea's role in transmission. Mistakes compounded. Flagellant brotherhoods roamed the countryside, whipping themselves in bloody spectacles to appease divine fury, drawing crowds that became breeding grounds for infection. Political pressures mounted as wars paused, truces forged in fear, but alliances frayed under the weight of mutual suspicion. Each choice, born of ignorance and hope, tightened the noose. As the system's foundation's feudal oaths, ecclesiastical authority began to crack under the strain of unrelenting death. The tipping point arrived not in a single cataclysm, but in a cascade of failures that overwhelmed the medieval order, like a dam bursting under relentless rain. By 1348, the plague engulfed major cities. In Paris, graves overflowed into streets slick with effluent. In Florence, Boccaccio chronicled families abandoning kin, the air thick with the stench of decay. Hospitals, once havens of herbal remedies and prayer, became charnel houses where physicians fled, leaving the afflicted to writhe in isolation. Trade halted, ports silent, save for the lap of waves against ghost ships. Feudal manors stood empty, lords powerless as serfs died or deserted. The rhythmic thud of plows replaced by an eerie quiet broken only by carrion birds' calls. Social fabrics tore, Jews scapegoated in pogroms, their wells poisoned in baseless accusations, flames consuming neighborhoods amid screams of vengeance. The system, built on interdependence, faltered as trust evaporated, each failure amplifying the next in a symphony of collapse that no edict could silence. Human suffering etched itself into the annals of history, a tapestry of agony where families fractured under the plague's merciless blade, mothers clutched, children convulsing with fever, their small bodies bloating grotesquely before going still in the dim light of thatched cottages. Orphans wandered fog-shrouded roads, begging amid piles of unburied dead, the ground soft with rot underfoot. In Siena, construction on the Grand Cathedral halted mid workers, hammers falling silent as death claimed half the population, leaving scaffolds like skeletal fingers against the sky. Social breakdown deepened divisions. The wealthy barricaded in villas, feasting while the poor scavenged in plague pits. The acrid smoke of burning bodies stinging eyes and lungs. Riots erupted in hunger-stricken towns, the clash of makeshift weapons echoing through plazas once filled with laughter. Faith wavered as priests succumbed, last rites unspoken, leaving souls adrift in a world where heaven seemed deaf to please. The collapse manifested in these intimate horrors, a slow erosion of humanity's bonds. As the Black Death receded by 1351, having claimed up to 60 million lives, a third of Europe's population, the continent emerged, scarred, its medieval structures irreparably altered. Labor shortages empowered survivors, serfs negotiating higher wages and freedoms, chipping away at feudalism's iron grip. The church's authority waned, indulgences questioned amid the ruble of failed prayers, sowing seeds for the Reformation. Economic shifts birthed new mercantile classes. Trade routes rerouted to bypass devastated regions, fostering innovation in banking and navigation. Art darkened, Memento mori motifs infiltrating fresque skeletons dancing with the living, a grim reminder of mortality's equality. Yet from the ashes rose resilience. Universities flourished, with fresh inquiries into medicine and science, challenging ancient doctrines. The plague's shadow lingered in depopulated villages, overgrown with weeds, silent bells in abandoned churches. But it propelled Europe toward the Renaissance, a rebirth forged in the crucible of loss. The Black Death was no mere epidemic. It was the unraveling of an epoch, a rupture that exposed the illusions of permanence in human affairs. In its wake, empires teetered, societies reformed, and the course of history bent toward modernity. As we gaze back through the mists of time, the echoes of those final breaths remind us. Collapse lurks not in grand spectacles, but in the quiet accumulation of overlooked warnings. Europe rose anew, but forever haunted by the specter of what was lost, a world where death danced unseen, reshaping destinies in its inexorable embrace.